So the latest firmware update on LG's 2020 OLEDs has added a new fine-tuned dark areas setting to help mitigate near-black gamma issues in VRR mode. How should you use this setting? Let me show you in this video. Hello everyone, Vincent Thiel from HDTV Test here. I am a TV firmware reviewer. If I summon the picture menu on this LG C10 or CX OLED and click on the support icon, if I click on software update, you can see that I'm currently running the latest firmware version of 3.21.18. And this firmware is being rolled out to LG OLED TVs with the Alpha 9 Gen 3 chipset. This means the CX or C10 and also the GX or G10. Now, the main purpose of this firmware is to add a new setting in the picture menu. So if I click on additional settings, you can see that on this page here, LG has added a new fine-tuned dark areas setting that will allow you to adjust the near black gamma in VRR mode, and it is only applicable in VRR mode. So if I get out from this menu here and bash the green button on the remote control, you can see that we are currently running in VRR mode with a maximum resolution of 4K at 120 frames per second. Using RGB 10-bit 40 gigabits per second FRL fixed rate link HDMI 2.1 method of transmission. And what we are going to do is to again go into the picture menu, and I will try to show you the effects of this fine-tuned dark areas setting. Now, I'm not entirely sure how much you can see due to the limited dynamic range of my camera because I'm filming an HDR presentation on this TV with an SDR video in the end, but hopefully you can see that if I lower the fine-tuned dark area setting, if you pay attention to this area here, you can see that the shadow detail starts to disappear to the point of being crushed. And if I increase it all the way up to the maximum of plus 30, you can see the shadow detail being extremely clear without affecting too much of the rest of the image in terms of the specular highlights. But you can see that because the near black gamma is brightened too much now, the whole picture may look a bit more washed out. So how should you use this setting then? Before going into that, what I wanted to point out is that this setting is only applicable with VRR engaged, as is the case currently. So let's say if you start playing a 4K Blu-ray or a Blu-ray, and if you can bear with me for a while I summon my Blu-ray player app. By the way, this LG CX or C10 OLED is hooked up to an Xbox Series X using a certified ultra high-speed HDMI 2.1 cable from British manufacturer TrueHQ, which I am testing at the moment. And if I bash the green button on the remote control to summon the freezing information bar, and like cookies consent on websites, you don't know where it'll pop up next, and currently it is residing on the bottom left corner of the screen. And you can see that even though VRR is still engaged on the console level, the Blu-ray app will disable VRR, causing a fixed refresh rate of around 23.97 frames per second, and it is currently using an HDMI 2.0 pipeline as well, which is of course logical because even 4K Blu-ray discs, they do not need a full HDMI 2.1 bandwidth. And if I can go into the picture menu to show you that changing the additional settings won't affect the picture if it is not in VRR mode. But before that, I will need to change to game mode, because with ALLM, the TV will automatically switch into game mode only when you play a game. So let's try to go into game mode, and then what we will do is to go into additional settings, and let's say if I actually change this fine-tune dark area setting, you can see that it doesn't have any effect whatsoever on the picture. And if I go all the way down, the picture does not change at all. regardless of what you do to this setting, because this setting is only applicable to VRR content. So let's say if you are playing a Blu-ray or 4K Blu-ray, because VRR is disabled, then the setting won't affect your Blu-ray or 4K Blu-ray playback from the Xbox Series X if you are indeed still using the Xbox Series X for watching 4K Blu-rays. But I wanted to also point out that, if I actually go into one of the streaming apps on the Xbox Series X, and let's say if I summon Disney Plus, and this will apply to Netflix or in fact any other streaming apps on the console as well, and if I actually summon the information bar again, you can see that VRR mode has been engaged again. And let's say if I go into one movie, and if I pause it here, and you can see that it is still running in VRR mode and at 60 frames per second as well for a 24 frames per second movie. Let me show you what this fine-tune dark area setting does to the picture, because currently we are streaming from an app on the Xbox Series X and VRR is still active. So if I actually increase fine-tune dark areas, you can see that the near black gamma has brightened, causing the whole picture to look washed out. And then if you go all the way down, because we are currently in VRR mode, it will also darken the shadow detail. So with this in mind, I think, I need to stress that you should really use Disney Plus and Netflix and all other streaming apps from your TV rather than from the Xbox Series X, because first of all, you're not going to be getting true 24 frames per second output. So that is one downside. And the other downside is that this fine-tune dark area setting, let's say if you adjust it for a certain game, it will also affect your streaming content if you are watching it from an app on the Xbox Series X. So with this out of the way, what I'm going to do is to show you some charts that I have actually measured in terms of the fine-tune dark areas. Now, the thing with trying to measure this setting is that because the setting is only applicable in VRR mode, and my signal generator, which helps with an efficient calibration workflow, is only going to be outputting a fixed refresh rate. It cannot output a variable refresh rate. So I have to do this manually in a painstaking manner to get all these results. But as you can see here, this is the chart with VRR disabled in a calibrated HDR game mode, and this is the chart with VRR enabled. And you can see that even maybe up to the midtones, the gamma has been brightened, causing a more washed out effect. Now, if I lower the fine-tune dark area setting to just even -10, you can see that it will start crushing shadow detail from this over darkened gamma here. And I think, the sweet spot is going to be between -5 and -3. So if I actually go back up to -5, you can see that these are the gamma points that I've painstakingly measured in VRR mode. And then if we go up to -3, then you can see that these are the gamma points. So I wouldn't advise you to go beyond -5 if you are interested in preserving shadow detail in a game that has, correct black levels originally anyway. Now, interestingly, you can also use this setting to try and compensate for a game that naturally has elevated black level, such as Call of Duty Black Ops Cold War. So that game, when I tested it on the Xbox Series X, I saw elevated black level, especially when compared with the PS5, and you can use this fine-tune dark areas setting to a certain degree to compensate for that. And this control is certainly a more targeted and refined setting than, say, using the overall brightness control setting to compensate for elevated black levels. Now, bear in mind that this fine-tune dark area setting is static rather than dynamic. What this means is that depending on the frame rate response of a VRR game, you may need to adjust or tweak the setting from game to game to get the best outcome for each game, because it does not adjust itself automatically depending on the frame rates of the game. And then I'm going to check out how this affects the VRR flicker. Now, LG has emphasized that this setting is primarily to deal with the near black gamma issue, but I wanted to check out the VRR flicker issue as well, because I think that may present more of a problem to some of you who are sensitive to flickering near black. So here I'm playing this game Tell Me Why on the Xbox Series X, and we are currently in VRR mode, as you can see here, and the screen is flickering away in a visible manner slightly. I hope you can actually see it from the camera, and if I actually bring up the static menu, you can see that the flicker should be quite visible as well. Now what we're going to do is to try and see whether the fine-tune dark areas setting will affect this VRR flicker. And if we go down, we don't really want to go down below 10, and it doesn't really mitigate the flicker at all to my eyes. But let's say if I go all the way up to near the maximum value of 30, you can see that maybe the flicker is slightly less obvious. And this is because what we are doing is to lift the VRR flicker outside the troublesome zone, so to speak, and this will reduce the visibility of this VRR flicker. But as a direct result, you may be able to work out that the black level will also look elevated and near blacks will look washed out. So this is akin to looking at an IPS panel, which is, I know, what most of you OLED owners don't like. But I think this VRR flicker is a hardware problem at the panel level on 2020 OLEDs and even 2021 OLEDs. And it is a case of pick your poison, really, whether you are going to be more bothered by the VRR flicker or more bothered by this washed out picture elevated blacks that is akin to watching an IPS or TN LCD panel, which I know is not ideal, but I think from the point of view of VRR on consumer televisions, I don't think any other manufacturer has got VRR correct. Let's say the Samsung QLEDs, their VRR is a mess with very weird gamma response as well. And Sony TVs don't even have VRR yet, not even last year's XH90 or X900H. And I'm not entirely sure when this year's Sony televisions will receive the VRR update. And the reason why VRR flicker is more obvious on OLEDs is because of their native true 0 candela per square meter blacks, which doesn't allow any leeway in terms of the panel response changes in VRR mode, whereas on LED LCDs, because the native black level is higher, it may mask this VRR flicker to a certain degree. But again, among consumer TVs, I don't think the overall gaming experience will be better than LG OLEDs. For more videos on LG OLEDs and HDMI 2.1 gaming, I've created this playlist here if you'd like to click on it, and I will see you in the next video.